Welcome to the Beauty Biz Show. I'm your host, Lori Crete, a career-loving esthetician and beauty entrepreneur on a mission to empower fellow estheticians. If you are a solo or small business owning esthetician and you enjoy this podcast and curious about how we can work together, visit beautybizclub.com for mentorship and essential business growth tools. If you're looking to boost your retail sales and elevate client care, check out my line of luxury spa wraps and headbands at spastar.net. Now, join me as I bring you inspirational messages from beauty industry experts and practical tips to help you achieve beauty biz success. Get ready for some serious beauty biz entertainment. Hi, everybody. Just a quick message before we dive into today's episode. I just want to make an announcement, and I am speaking to all of my past, present Beauty Biz Club members and the emerging esthetician community. This is a special invite for you to join me for a really casual meet and greet on Monday, June 23rd from 8:30 to 10 a.m. in the Cosmopolitan Hotel Penthouse in Las Vegas. It's just the perfect chance for us to sip on a mimosa or a cup of coffee, to chat and connect before the Vegas show starts that Monday morning. If you would like to join, just email Debbie at beautybizclub.com and she will be sure to send you all of the details. Also, I'll be demoing my special facial moves at the Sorella Apothecary booth. This year, their booth is number 1107. This is happening on Sunday, June 22nd at 12:30 p.m., right after their advanced massage technique class, where I will also be making a special guest appearance. And rumor has it, their new booth setup is a must see. Okay, I hope to see you at one of the two places in June in Las Vegas. All right, let's dive into today's episode of the Beauty Biz Show podcast. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Beauty Biz Show. Today, I have a very special guest, my dear friend, Jerry Nettuno. This is our third time recording a podcast. You're the only person that's ever been on my show 3 times. Welcome, Jerry.
Is it only 3 times?
Only 3 times. I know it feels like a lifetime together doing things, but only 3 times on the Beauty Biz Show. And I thought it was such a crazy day that we were meeting and having this conversation because yesterday I left Schedulicity and switched over to Vagaro, which the technical part of it was so simple, but I feel like a piece of my heart was torn out.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had mixed emotions too.
Yes, just hearing those words come out of your mouth is pretty crazy for me to hear.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
So, I mean, I think we have a lot to chat about. I'm just curious. You invented, if I remember correctly, you invented online booking, like the concept of it. Is that correct?
Pretty much Schedulicity was the pioneer in the whole idea of being able to schedule services online. There were a couple. Vagaro started, I don't know, 6-8 months later from that time. But yeah, I mean, it was a very, very new thing that had not been done before, and something I'm proud of.
You should be, because you've made so many lives, like you filled it with convenience in this world. I think I could book maybe 5 more people. I'd like to say a day, because at the time when Schedulicity first came out, I was doing smaller appointments, like an eyebrow wax, a spray tan, bouncing all over the place. I could get 5 more people in if I didn't have to call everybody and say, when do you want to book? And it was funny. It was a weird hiccup at first. People were a little scared of it. And now people are like, no, I'm going to schedule later when I go home. They don't even want to rebook at the end of their facial. Yeah. I'll get dings at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night that my facial clients are scheduling.
Well, Yeah, I mean, it's that whole dynamic has just to be alive and witness just how much all of that has changed in general is a pretty crazy thing to even understand. When I think about Lauren, um, even she doesn't have a clue like what we were dealing with 10 years ago. Forget, 15 years ago when I was getting this thing rolling. People were not used to doing anything like that online, and it's very, very different, right? We went from our biggest competition was a scribbly calendar that people kept on their front desk. That's what we were competing against, and people were like, well, why should I change? That works.
Yeah.
And we were
My
like,
first business coach said, you need online booking. And I go, oh no, no. I
yeah,
was hesitant at first.
yeah,
My clients want to talk to me. And then I realized that's the least efficient way to run a business, a service-based business, is to
yeah.
sit on the phone all day long booking your
There's
appointments.
no question about it because they get plenty of time to talk with you when you're with them. Um, but yeah, I mean, I've said the same thing since the day I started, which is that our business was built for people like you and like Lauren and people in the beauty industry and the health industry and the people that get into this business. um, um, these are artists. These are people that are really passionate about what they do and about the services they provide. I don't think they got into the business so that they could spend 5 hours a night on the phone.
Yeah.
That's not what they did it for.
I want to ask you a question. So you thought of this on the airplane. I remember you telling me, and it's funny. You said I could book a flight to France in three
Yep,
minutes, but it took me 3 days to find my massage therapist. So
sure.
you have this idea on an airplane. What was the first step that you took creating a concept, really? Like, do you remember? Okay, I have to do this.
Yeah, well, you probably will remember this when I start, but it was kind of a weird. It was a kind of a weird sort of path, right? Because the idea was born around my selfish, inability to be able to book an appointment when I wanted to book an appointment with somebody. Um, and it was very difficult because, like I said, typically the time that I thought about calling, somebody, first of all, good luck trying to get somebody in the daytime who is doing, what you or my daughter or my hairstylist is doing, right? Good luck with that. And typically I'm not thinking about it. The time that I would think about that was at night when I finally had a chance to settle down. And you probably remember, there was a time where we were booking, God, I don't even know, 80 to 120,000 appointments every 24 hours. And you probably remember 80% of those appointments were booked after business hours. So I wasn't
Yeah.
alone. That's when people think about, doing that. So the original idea was born from my selfish idea of, how do I make this easier for myself? Um, but what happened is when I really started to dig in and I brought in some people to start helping me build the concept and the idea, what we realized pretty quickly was that the people that were providing all these services had it way more difficult than I did. My mere, you know, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Inconvenience of trying to schedule with them was paled in comparison to what they were going through on a daily basis, trying to provide these services and manage their calendar and talk to all these people and book all these appointments. And when we started, we really quickly realized that, whoa, you know it's the problem is not with the consumers that are trying to book these services. Sure, we can make that streamlined and easier, and it's certainly the future to do it that way. But if we can actually help the people that are providing these services by streamlining their business, giving them more time to themselves or more time to do, to become more efficient and make more money, then we've really got something. And then so we kind of pivoted that direction, and that was really the turning point for our business.
But I want to know, when you think of something, who do you call first? Like, how do you even get started for those people listening to this show that go, gosh, I want to start a business? Like, I know when I started my Spa Star wraps,
Mhm.
I know the first phone call I made, and it was to a
Yeah.
clothing designer who used to be my client because I just want
Mhm.
to be pointed in the right direction. So
Mhm.
you come up with a concept that is unheard of. Who do you call first?
So at that particular time, I had met this guy who was a software developer. And I was talking with him about several different ideas and things that he had thought about. And so he was the first person that I talked to about it and said, what would it look like? How would you do something like this? And so on and so forth. And then I brought in some really talented people like Michael Wilson and some other people like that who helped me take the vision and kind of, dial that into action items that you could say, okay, this is what we want this to do. Now we need to have it built. And having the build part was not the hardest part, right? Because you can hire people to do software development. I think within the next 18 to 24 months, most software development is going to be done by AI.
Yeah.
Um, it's already happening. But anyway, in those days, you could bring software developers in to write it. Really, the challenge was actually understanding what it needed to be, and actually, because it's one thing. Okay, we want to be able to make appointments online, but you can't say, "Here's a business. We want to make appointments online." It has to be broken down into the tiniest little detail that then can be built, and understanding that process was a monumental process.
Because we've become such good friends, I have experienced quite a bit of your Schedulicity journey with you. But
Yeah.
was there a time, and I watched what you went through, we could talk about COVID, but other than COVID, was there a time you go, I'm out, this is not going to work, I'm going to give up?
Yeah, I mean, there were several times that, because like I said, we were so excited, right? Because we saw the difficulty that people were having. And I thought, oh my gosh, if we can do this, if we can create this tool that empowers these businesses and allows them to be more efficient, more profitable, and all the things, I was like, well, we're going to be like, we won't even be able to handle, the sheer numbers of people. And then that's not what was happening, right?
I know
People
this happens with
people,
every business, right? You
yeah,
have this grandiose vision, and then you have a come to reality meeting with yourself a few months in.
yeah. People were like, well, I'm using this scribbly notebook on my front thing and it works just fine. And I was like, and we were like, wait, really? Like, do you know how ridiculously inefficient that is? And so that was a very difficult time when I realized, wow, this is going to be more difficult than I expected, right? I mean, these people are going to need some education on why this will help them.
So
Um,
tell me, because we've never talked about this before. This was probably pre-Lori in Schedulicity's world. What did you do to make the pivot, the turning point happen where people started real like what was the business strategy or the one thing aha moment where you go, "Oh my gosh, this is what we need to do and it's working. People love it."
Yeah, I think there was two things happening. Part was us, and part of it was the world was changing around us, and both were helpful, right? So one is we were like, okay, well, what it's not going to be as easy as we thought, but so what are the real pain points, right? The real pain points, and so we started to dig in and better understand the real pain points. And then we got really good at talking to people about those pain points and how we could help. But a big but I think equally, and again, this is luck, as much as anything else, is the world was rapidly changing, right? The iPhone had just come out in 2006, right? And by 2008, right? The next or the third version of the iPhone was out, and now people were starting to do more online, right? So it was kind of, I would love to take all the credit, but the truth of the matter is it was kind of a convergence of things. One was us better understanding how to talk about the pain points and how we could help them. And at the same time, it was starting to become, the behavior was changing,
What
right?
year did you start Schedulicity?
I started what would become Schedulicity in 2006.
Okay. And then when did apps come on the phone? Do you remember that? Like they really
Um,
were a thing for a long time when we started
yeah,
using the phone.
gosh, I don't remember. I want to say 2010.
Okay.
Yeah, 2010, 2011. But yeah, I mean, at that time, I mean, things were moving really quickly. And again, to think about where we are today in, what seems like a long time ago, but in the, it's not really that long ago. I mean, now you look at people like Lauren, um, and or even I'll give you an example. Lauren is what, 27, but remember, she grew up this way. She knew no other way. She would be astounded if she knew that you even did things the way that you did them. It would make no sense to her. And then just this past weekend, we were over at the branding, at our branding that we do at Brian's Ranch every year, and Lauren's youngest sister, their mother had another daughter after we were divorced, and so they have a younger daughter named Summer, and she's 19, right, and she doesn't even text.
What does she do? I don't know. Like
I,
talking to
I
her
was
phone?
texting her. I was texting her because she was going to maybe house sit for us and take care of the animals while Kenzie and I were out of town. And she didn't respond to me. And I talked to Lauren, and Lauren goes, "Yeah, her generation doesn't even text anymore.
Well, what do you
They
do? How do you communicate?
they only communicate through Instagram. They just direct message each other." And then I talked to her. I talked to her over the weekend, and she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't see your text because I don't text with my friends." And I'm like, so it's like already Lauren is now starting to be the, in terms of technology. So it's frightening how fast all of that happens.
For you listening in, Lauren is Jerry's daughter, who is now an esthetician and co-founder of the Emerging Esthetician. Co-founder, her and I set up a support community for emerging estheticians. So just so you guys know, listening in, we are referring to Lauren a lot. That's Jerry's daughter.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that's funny. Lauren was sending me pictures from this weekend. That Montana sky was art.
Yeah. It was a beautiful, beautiful weekend for sure.
So gorgeous. I want to ask you, I know the answer to this, at least from my perspective as a consumer of your product that you created. But what do you think made Schedulicity so special and different for, you've mentioned it really supports the small business owner, the solo
Mhm.
practitioner in the beauty space, many other spaces, but my world beauty space. What made it so special?
Um, you know, if I really, especially now, I've gone through a lot of a period of a lot of reflection, in the last 6 months, through and last year, but since this merger was finalized back in October, I've gone through a lot of reflection and just kind of introspective about this last decade and everything that we did, and because obviously it's very it's exciting for all the obvious things, but obviously there's a lot of emotion involved, as well, and so in answer to your question, I have thought a lot about that. And to me, the answer is simple. It's the people that I surrounded myself with that were a part of building this company, because these people, people like Karin, and Jane and Michael, and the list goes on and on and on. these people were the most dedicated people that you could ever imagine to um, to what we were doing. They were so proud and so vested in our mission to help small businesses. And I don't think there's any question why Schedulicity was different. Yeah, and I've thought more about it in the past 6 months than I thought about it in the last years, right? Just because of the transition that we've gone through. But without a doubt, it was the truly talented, hardworking, passionate, and caring people that made this company what it was. And I think that people who used Schedulicity, like yourself, I think you could feel that.
I would say that what made you different in my world was the customer care was such a positive experience in a world where that very rarely exists, right?
Yes, yes.
And I heard that on repeat. Um, I know I want to talk about COVID for a second because
Mhm.
I'm curious. I'm curious about something. So you are a very generous person, and that was became very apparent during COVID. How long did you gift every Schedulicity user that you didn't charge them for a year, I think? How long
Yeah,
was it that you gave Schedulicity for free to support
um,
providers that didn't work?
about 11 months.
11 months.
Yeah.
And being generous is an amazing thing, but do you think that caused some hiccups in your world as a founder, owner, operator?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that it did. Um, who knows what would be happening today, if it wasn't for that. Basically, it cost us, millions of dollars. I off the head my head, $3 to $4.5 million. We basically just,
Gifted.
gifted. Okay. And now again, I would do it all over again tomorrow if the same situation happened, because it was the right thing to do. Um, and I think it was a
Did
good
anyone else do that
decision.
that you know of in the online booking
I
space?
think I think some did. Um, uh, Fady Helu, who is the founder and CEO at Vagaro, he tells the story when he came to our offices the first time when we were announcing to our staff, all the changes and things that were going on. He told that story, and the very first conversation that he and I ever had over a year ago, first talking about this potential, merger, um, he started the conversation by talking about this very thing, and he said that when he woke up and saw that I did what I had done, he said his first reaction was he wanted to kill me. And I kind of knew that was going to happen, right? My 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 evil, part. I kind of knew that, when I did that, and I did it very publicly and very early, very very early, days into this. A matter of fact, there wasn't even a lockdown when I did this. It was before that, and anyway, I think he eventually did it as well. But basically, um, you know, if you didn't do it, you were a pariah, and if you did do it, it was going to be costly, right? And so I knew that was what was going to happen with the competition. They were going to be forced to make that decision, but I wasn't thinking about them as much as I was thinking about, what we could do for our people. And the story. Like I said, I can remember it like it was yesterday. This was all starting to unfold. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew what was going on. There was no government. Um, there was no government. Um, um, you know, uh,
Protocol, like
protocol. Nobody had stepped in. There were no, you know, uh, announcements to the nation or anything like that. But remember, Lauren had just started, and she was just starting to really start to make things happen. And she called me in tears on a Thursday because she said that whatever it was, 8 out of her 9 appointments that day had canceled. And she was calling me in tears because she's like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent, whatever. Not like, oh my God, we're in a no, nobody knew, right? But it was that
Yeah.
night on a Thursday that I want to say it was like the 7th or 8th of March or something like that. And I was just laying in bed that night, and that's hearing Lauren is when I realized, oh my gosh, this is going to devastate the very people that we built Schedulicity to serve.
Yeah.
It's going to crush these people. Um, and I, that was really the catalyst, for that, because I as you know, I mean, I don't know how you can continue to charge people for something that they cannot use if they want to
Yeah.
use it, you know. And so it just didn't make any sense. So as I said, and I thought it was a good business decision because had I continued to charge people, um, surely a huge percentage of our customers would have canceled. I
Yeah.
would have canceled if it was me. If I'm
And
paying
then you don't know where they're going to go back to.
for
Like,
4 months into this, I'm paying for something that I can't even use. I'm probably not going to do it
yeah.
anymore. And so, whatever we had, 15,000, 17,000, however many, small businesses we had, if we lost half of them because I was charging them, and then all of a sudden someday this ended and we were ready to move on, I'd have to go back and re-sign up all of the people that we lost, as opposed to saying, you know what, I'm not going to charge you for it. And then whenever that end came, which nobody knew, right? But at the end of the game, at the end of that time period, we'd still have the same amount of businesses that we had when we started.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so for those two reasons, I just thought it was a no-brainer at the time.
Well, I want to go back a little bit to talking about how special the people at your team at Schedulicity, because they were known for their customer care and their kindness. Uh, and tell you, I've had the opportunity because of you and Lauren to sit with some of the, let's just say, higher ups at Vagaro. And we talked about getting the founder of Vagaro on the podcast, which I will, but I wanted to give you a voice to chat about this first. But one
Yeah.
of, uh, the people at Vagaro said, we'd love to get Fred. Is it Fred?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Fred, on your show. We want people to know this was not a hostile takeover. And I
Right.
go, yeah, okay, perfect. But I want to hear Jerry's story first
Yeah.
because you're my friend and this is where the relationship is before I chat with Fred. So
Right.
why Vagaro? When did you decide it was time to merge or to whatever it is, sell?
Well, so so in the beginning of 2024, right, we had, now we'd started and ended COVID. But as you know, it was in 2024, in the beginning of 2024, I would say that the majority of the country was still in a COVID hangover, right?
Yeah.
And there were business metrics, um, everyday business metrics that were not the same as they were before COVID. So there was a lot
And
of
you have
uncertainty.
such precise data and insight into
Yeah,
this type of information for
yeah,
service-based industries.
yeah,
It's not a guessing game for you guys.
yeah. And we started to see some things that we'd never seen before that were different, right? After.
Tell me one thing you saw that was different. I'm
The
curious.
one thing we saw a lot of people leaving the industry.
Yeah.
We saw people leaving for business circumstances, and so on and so forth. And that was, there was a lot of that. And so, I was in the midst of putting together our roadmap and our strategy for the year, right? Because as a CEO and founder of Schedulicity, I have a board of directors, and we meet on a quarterly basis. So in the beginning of the year, typically I'm presenting to the board, the plan, the strategy for the year, what we think our projected revenue is, our goals, and so on and so forth, right? This is what companies do. And so I was really starting to think about what the next steps were. And in honesty, Lori, there were a lot of factors. One was, as we've talked about before, we kind of created this space. And not too long ago, it was us and a handful of companies, and we were dominating the market. But it's very different now. There's who knows how many competitors out there, ones I've never even heard of
Yeah.
out there. It's become a very crowded space. And so that's a whole nother thing. Everything is more expensive, right? It becomes more expensive to advertise. It becomes more expensive to acquire new customers, and so on and so forth. And so I was really starting to kind of sort of think through, what these next couple of years were going to look like. And one of the things that I realized was we were probably going to have to raise a significant round of capital again, right, to help us compete and to continue our growth trajectory. And it was not something that I was really excited about doing. It's always a difficult process to go through when you're fundraising for capital, and so on. And I was trying to think about kind of just weighing out what would be the best thing for my team, our shareholders, myself, so on and so forth. And I was kind of thinking about all these things as we were going into 2024, right? And I was weighing all of it. The fact that we were seeing some I don't want to say disturbing, but some trends that definitely we were paying attention to, that I was thinking about, is this going to affect the business? Then at the same time, like I said, a lot of new competitors were coming out and they were raising money. And, it's not like I was worried about whether or not we were going to be successful, but it's just like, okay, well, that now there's more, it's going to take more money. I guess, again, everything is more expensive, right? And I was just trying to contemplate what the next steps were for the company. And right about the time that I was having these conversations in my head, I got a call from one of my board members, and he said, "Hey, one of our guys, one of our board members, who's also become a very dear friend of mine, is the head of technology banking at Oppenheimer, which is pretty huge, right? And he was always extremely helpful in for me growing Schedulicity." And he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, one of my people was at a conference this last week, and the CEO of Vagaro was at this conference and speaking. And my guy had a conversation with them, and somehow in the conversation, it came up, my ties to Schedulicity, and he said that." Basically, the guy came back and said, "Oh my God, the CEO wants to talk to Jerry about some potential, synergies, and basically he called me and he said, 'Hey, this just happened. Would you be interested in taking a call?'" And I said, "Sure. What's the downside, right? Because remember, I built a company, but we have shareholders and I have a board of directors, and so I have a fiduciary responsibility, for that. So you never want to close the door at looking at an opportunity that might be beneficial, right? And so I said, sure. And then, heck, probably not 2 weeks later, I got an email from Fred, the CEO and founder at Vagaro, and he said, hey, I'd love to chat. Would you be open for a conversation? And I said, sure. So we set up a call early 2024. And it actually might even have been in December before the holidays, right? And we had a Zoom call, and it was a great call. He basically said, hey, let's get catched up, caught up. And he said, how are things been going? How did COVID, and so I told him, he teased me about waiving the fees. And so he had to waive the fees. And he told me some other funny stories. He told me that, he started Vagaro, and he was so excited, and he thought he, had this incredible idea that nobody had ever come up with. And, he thought about having this marketplace for services, and he was sending it to these guys that were, he had hired to start, building Vagaro. And one of them, who's still there, responded to his email, and he's like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. There's already a company that does all this. And they look really good. And he was like, Fred told me, he was like, what? And he looked it up, and it was Schedulicity. So anyway, he told me that story, and we had a really nice call. And he said, how'd you get through COVID? And I told him about everything we were doing. He told me all the things that they did and how he handled it, and so on. And then, basically came to, what are you thinking? What are the next steps for Schedulicity? Would you be interested in a potential merger or acquisition or some kind of a partnership? And I told him the same thing that I mentioned earlier to you, which is, I said, sure, I'd be willing to have a conversation about it. I'm not going to, I'm always open to looking for, opportunities for Schedulicity. So that's how it started. And then, we ended up having a couple calls after that. And then he started to identify what he was thinking. And then we kind of went from there. I called a board meeting and started to present the idea to the board. And, these are all the protocol and how these things happen with every company.
So it was about a year of conversation till full circle.
Well, it was about, 3 or 4 months of conversation before it started to get serious, right? Because the way these things work is, you and I are just talking. And I say, hey, I've got this, successful, podcast beauty thing, and you do, I want to acquire you, or we should merge together. And then so we talk about that for a while. And I'm listening to you, and you're listening to me, and maybe you're like, screw you, I'm not interested in that, and it's over. Or we come to this, we come to the conclusion that, yeah, I mean, this could be something that's worth, talking about. Well, then we would sign a letter of intent, right? Or I'm sorry, an IOI, which is called an indication of interest. And that's just a formal document where we say, okay, Lori, you and I are officially interested in talking about this.
This is business.
Yeah. Then we start to get into the details, right? And then that's where it starts to get complicated, because I might have certain ideas, you might have certain ideas, we might not agree on all the ideas. So all that has to be worked out. When that starts to get worked out, then the next step is a letter of intent, right? But the letter of intent starts then to actually outline terms and things, and what, who, and how all of that would actually come through, and that is a lot, right? And then you go through several months, right? And when you're working on the LOI, by the way, then that's when all the attorneys get involved, because they have attorneys. We had to bring on, our attorneys to represent us, and then then it becomes a whole nother world, right?
It feels like, and both of us have been through this before. It feels like dating, marriage, divorce.
Yeah, yeah,
Kind of crazy, right? In a
yeah.
business way.
Yeah, exactly. And then, um, and it's a very complicated process that happens every day, right? I mean, every
Yeah.
company. But it's a complicated process because, at a certain point, it's me and you, and we're talking about these ideas, and we're the visionaries, right? But then at the end of the day, the details have to get worked out by attorneys and financial people and all that stuff, right? And then that's a whole nother process, and um, it's typically complicated and stressful. And then once you get through that and you agree on all those terms, then a letter of intent is signed. And once the letter of intent is signed, then you go into due diligence.
And that's where they take a deep dive into every penny you've ever spent in a company, right? I remember talking to you through that part.
Yeah,
You're like, I've
and
never
that's
been so
just and
stressed.
that's just a part of it.
Yeah.
But
And it
it
makes it
is
part of it, I imagine.
it's an agonizing process for any company to go through.
Yeah.
And 8 to 9 times out of 10, the whole deal goes to hell during
And
due
that's part of
diligence.
it.
Yeah, because it gets testy, right? Or the company, one company or the other company, now because they're deep down in it, right? Um, you know, they find things that they don't like, right? Um, because in our case, we've been around for 14 years. You know, who know they're looking at every contract that I ever signed in history. I don't even remember 99% of them, but they're going through every contract that was ever signed. Um, they're doing deep due diligence on all the legal issues, making sure that there wasn't any skeletons in the past. And at the same time, we're doing due diligence on them, right? And then they do, so there's financial due diligence, then there's business due diligence, and then there's technical due diligence. So it's literally three different, avenues, right? So they have somebody that does technical due diligence, which is actually looking at our actual technology and the actual software code that was written line by line.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Talk about,
Um,
I don't know who has that job, but I feel bad for him having to go through stuff like that.
Exactly. And Craig Dugas, who's been instrumental in Schedulicity, he was the one that kind of worked through that with Christina, who's just, again, wouldn't have been able to do any of this without them, but they were fantastic during due diligence. But then you have to go through all of that process, and that process is grueling. Um, and then if you get through due diligence, then the next step is actually creating the final document, which is the actual taking the letter of intent and all the terms that you've defined at a high level and then actually putting them into words in a contract. And that was the most grueling process, where most of the uh, um, you know if there was contention, it was during that time, right? Because and then also, there's other people involved, right? Because they have backing from a big private equity group, private equity company. And so you're now, once you get to that stage, that's who you're dealing with. And that's a whole different animal than just dealing with me, right? Fred and I, through this process, both had some trying times. And, we both said that, if it was he and I doing this, it would have been done in half the time.
Yeah.
But because there's a big private equity group involved and they've got, dozens of attorneys, and it's a long process that you have to go through.
We'll return to the episode after a quick message from our sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by Spa Star Luxury Wraps and Headbands. Are you looking to add a little luxury to your beauty biz? Spa Star wraps and headbands are an amazing way to elevate the client experience and boost your retail sales. Here are the top 3 reasons Spa Star wraps are estheticians' spa wear of choice. Number 1 is the fit. Spa Star wraps are size inclusive with a unique design that accommodates sizes 0 to 18. The feel. There is nothing else like this on the market. Just imagine if bamboo and silk had a very low maintenance baby. Buttery soft and unbelievably easy to care for. The third reason is functionality. The wraps are lightweight, water wicking, saving lots of space and limited treatment room storage, and reducing laundry loads with a drying time of approximately under 6 minutes. Use them in your treatments and chances are clients will want to take one home, providing a profitable boost in retail sales. Visit spastar.net for more details and be sure to check out the footer of the website at spastar.net for wholesale applications. Well, I want to ask you, as we wrap up the show today, just some reflective type questions. So I know when I sold my spa in LA, which was nothing like this, it was basically a sale of assets.
Mhm.
Very, very easy to do. But I saw my last client. I was so excited that it was over. And I remember my last client left and I sat there for a second, stunned, and started crying. Like
Yeah.
I was sick to my stomach. What were your last moment feelings when the deal was done?
Yeah, I think much the same. It's like, when you start a business, many times, I mean, your dream is that at some point the company grows, becomes valuable to other entities that might be interested because, you're thinking about an exit in the future that can make you, super successful, right? And that's how everybody thinks about it. That's how Jay thinks about things. That's how you think about things. It's one thing to, create this amazing, you know, um, you know, thing like Spa Star, Deluxe. But I'm sure, in the perfect world down the road, that company grows and some big, apparel company comes in and says, we want that. It would be huge for us, and that's what you kind of, dream about. However, when it happens, it's very much like losing a child, right? That goes away to college or worse, right? And because all of the special relationship with all of my people and all the things that we've done, all the things that we've built, it's tough to see that kind of go away and be run, by someone else. And so it's emotional. Vagaro's a great company. They're $1.5 billion company. They have 100,000 customers. You don't get to that point because you've got a bad company or a bad product. And I thought it was a great fit because uh, um, Fred and I had shared a lot of the same passion about helping our businesses. He's very passionate about that. I mean, he's the guy, like, if something's wrong or something's broken, he's got 500 employees, but he's up in the middle of the night tinkering around trying to figure out what's the problem. And so he thinks that way as well. The other thing is, listen, especially as an esthetician, we lost a lot of estheticians over the years to Vagaro because, somebody like Lauren, if she continues on the path that she's going to need a lot of technology and features and functionality that we don't have and are not on the direct radar. Really fancy POS and inventory control and all kinds of things like that. That were not really going to be in our roadmap anytime soon. And now our customers have all of that stuff at their fingertips. And so I just thought that would be a really good fit because at the end of the day, people and we had a very special relationship with our customers, and we didn't lose customers. The only time that we lost customers and was when they needed things that we did not have, right? And even then, they reluctantly left.
And then
Um,
talk about how much they missed your customer service.
exactly.
I
And
spent 3 hours yesterday just going through all the different things that I may or may not use. I mean,
yeah,
I'm in the treatment room just a few days a week now. I don't know if I need all of it, but it's there. I did a deep dive yesterday.
yeah.
So,
And some of the things they do, I really like. I mean, Lauren, they did a my site for Lauren, and it's
yeah,
beautiful.
their websites look good.
Yeah,
Like they've been $7,000 professionally done. I would agree.
exactly. Yeah. And so, I think that's good, and I think it's a good fit. But to your point, yeah, it's an emotional thing. I put a lot of time, a lot of work, and you know what? More than anything else, I miss the camaraderie, right?
Yeah,
And the just the electricity about of having a team of people that you pick to surround yourself with, who felt the same way that you did, and every day came to work, not being like, oh shit, I got to go to work today, but like just ready to, take that, mountain, because we were excited about it. And, I miss that, for sure. Um, because it's different when you work for a bigger company. It's hard. They've done a really good job at Vagaro, no doubt about it. But when you've got 500 or 600 employees, it's harder, to do that.
to have
And
the family
so,
time that you had at Schedulicity.
yeah, and I think that we had a very, very special relationship, with our customers, and all for and I miss that. You know.
Kind of leads into my next reflective type question. So for me, after I left LA, I didn't know it. I walked around for maybe 3 or 4 months like a zombie. I was in an identity crisis. So have you felt that? And then just segue right into what your next steps are, what you think is going to take place. So are you in an identity crisis as we speak?
I would say I kind of, I've had several life changes over a short period of time. One of them is obviously, the change with Schedulicity. The other one is, I sold my home,
Yeah. Oh
of
my God.
27 years, and that happened right in the heat of when all of this was going on as well. And
Magical place, by the way.
yeah,
I
thank you.
love your I call it a ranch. Lauren laughs at me, but I feel like it was just this magical Montana ranch.
It was definitely a magical place, and for I see a lot of parallels between that and my business, in the sense that it was a truly special place that people love to come. And when I met people or I was entertaining people, I had things where we brought in customers, right, from around the country. Duh. And I brought them to my house because, it was a part of who I was. But my family, my friends, people like Michael and Jane, like they have so many memories
Yeah.
from that house, and that, and so I probably should have planned, a little better in terms of timing, and not have everything happening at once. But because I think, as Kenzie would tell you if she was sitting here, I've struggled as much, if not more, about the house at sometimes than I have. Matter of fact, Lauren and Sunny hosted a Memorial Day barbecue at her house yesterday, because Kenzie and I are in a little townhouse that we rented in the middle of town, for a year while we're going through this transition. And my nephew and my niece are here, and my nephew, just got engaged, and he did it at our house because he and Nikki started their relationship at our house. Um, and so he asked me, could he propose when they were here over the holidays? And so, there's a lot of special memories. And yesterday was really weird. I told Kenja I'm driving over to Lauren's, and it's like, our house is where all of this happened.
Yeah.
This is the first time in history Lauren had the barbecue, right? And so it was just an interesting thing. Like I almost felt like I was passing the torch there. Um, So yeah, I think I definitely have gone through a little bit of an identity crisis. Obviously, I'm still working. I'm not retired yet. I'm still working with Vagaro at least through the conclusion of this whole merger. And then I'm not sure what'll happen after that. He's mentioned that he would love to have me stay and work on some projects. So we'll just see. Right now, I'm just trying to take a deep breath and help people get through the transition. I think overall, it's a really good transition. Um, I learned a long, long time ago that human beings by nature struggle mightily with change. It doesn't matter whether it's a bad change or a fantastic change. Change in general is really hard for people, and so, I've really tried to focus my time on trying to help our customers um, through this change, my team, through the change, and so on. And I think that at the same time helps me as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Staying busy for sure.
Yeah.
Last reflective question that I have here today is, if you could go back, and I have it written down because I want to ask it properly.
Mhm.
If you could go back to day one of Schedulicity, what advice would you give yourself now, knowing what you know after the full journey?
Mhm. Wow, that's a really great question. Um, I think that I probably would have, um, I probably would have brought in a couple of different types of people with different talents that I didn't bring in till later. I wish that I'll give you an example. Have you met Tracy?
I've heard about her. Lauren talks about her a lot.
Yeah, so Tracy is interestingly enough, what is one of Kenzie's best friends. They grew up together. They've known each other since they were 10, 11 years
Well, tell
old.
our listeners who Kenzie is, just so they know
Ken
what.
Kenzie is my remarkable better half,
Okay.
the love of my life, and she has this friend Tracy, who she talked to me, as we were starting to get to know each other, back when we were first started dating, 3 years ago. She was telling me about this friend got an MBA and she was doing all this. And she got this. She went from Honeywell and then got headhunted away to this startup in Silicon Valley, and she took that to the next level. And she just sounded remarkable. And so I met with her. I happened to be going to a conference that she was going to in Vegas, and we met there for a drink in the afternoon. And I was just blown away by her. And I had been thinking about bringing somebody. I needed somebody at the executive level to help me. And I knew that we were going to be going through some type of a process in the next couple of years, whether it be a big, round of capital that we were raising or something like we're going through right now. And anyway, long story short, I brought Tracy on, and she is in the role of chief operating officer. So she has the kind of day-to-day operations is the role of the COO. And she has been just absolutely incredible. She's remarkably talented, um, and and what she's been able to help me do in a very short period of time. My advice I would have given myself is that I should have found somebody like her 3 years into the process instead of waiting, until later. Um, that's one thing for sure. And then there was a couple of other opportunities that happened over the years, particularly on the side of partners that could have come along, that might have helped in different ways as well. So those would be just the top of mind things that I would think about. Other than that, um, not anything like, gosh, I wish I did, gosh, I wish I did that. I don't think so. For me, it's been the greatest source of pride of my entire, business life since I was, 17, 18 years old, because, we built a company that tens of millions of people use all over the country. And it wasn't just about making money. We had we made a real impact for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I will forever in my life be proud of that, and of
Yeah.
the people
And
that
you should be.
and of the people around me that not only helped, but inspired me along the way. And I've met some remarkable people. I was thinking about it this morning when I was driving, knowing that I was going to be talking to you today. You're a perfect example, right? You and Jay are not only people that I have done business with in the past, but I met you obviously because of Schedulicity. But you both have become people who are way beyond that. You're both people who I have just a tremendous amount of love for personally. As human beings, and people that I've grown to regard as literally some of my closest friends. Like, that's a big deal, you
Yeah.
know. People that I know that we could go on a trip together next weekend, and it would be one of the funnest weekends we could ever do. And so, just the fact that I was able to go through a process like that, make an impact on people, and then meet, you know, people like you and Michael and Jane, and people that Schedulicity made possible.
The
These,
connections.
these people in my lives. Um, I don't know how to put it into words, and I will forever be grateful and thankful for that.
Well, I'll tell you, I am grateful for Schedulicity, for our friendship, and I feel like it's kind of the end of an era for me. Not only did my Botox doctor of 10 years retire, now Schedulicity is no longer. It's been a wild month. So I'm
Yeah,
glad that you got to come on the show and make sense of it. I think a lot of people had that reaction when they heard,
yeah.
and just let everybody know it was mapped out very thoughtfully, and all is going to be okay in the world of online booking.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I mean, I'm sure that it'll be okay. Like I said, I mean, they have all of the features that you could ever want, and they're a good company, and they're not going anywhere. And we've made it really easy, right? Because we built all the technology to move people over without you
Oh,
having to do
it was one
any
button.
work. Yeah.
It
And,
was
and
over there in
that,
less than a minute. All my stuff was moved over.
that was 5 months of work. And the idea of it, because if you decided to not do it and go somewhere else, it is a nightmare of a thing. And so when we did made the decision to do it, Fred and I both right out of the gate were like, we have to make this so easy,
It was so
so easy. Now, at the end of the day, you have to learn some different things. The user experience is, the UI is different, right? But I think if you just give it a little time and learn to navigate around, we did all the hard work for you. And I think, just like Lauren said, the more she uses, the more she realizes, oh, this is really cool. I could do that, and I could do this. And that's the experience that I believe people will have. And I'm really looking forward to.
it's weird because honestly, I've never ever used any other online booking platform for,
Mhm.
I think close to 20 years. It's been
Yeah.
Schedulicity, and tomorrow morning I'm going to go to work early, set everything up, and just roll with it because Lauren has been a little North Star guiding light. She's like, "Don't worry, it's going to be easy. It's going to be
Yeah.
easy. Don't worry."
Yeah.
And so far, it has been.
Yeah, and I
But
think even Lauren's like, in the beginning she had a little bit of struggle, but it was more, again, struggling with change.
yeah,
And I mean, again, we could talk about that for a whole entire podcast, but it's like, me being in this townhouse, you know, I think Kenzie's literally ready to throw me out because I'm complaining about it incessantly, and it's just because, at the end of the day, it's a nice townhouse that people would probably be really happy to live in, but it's just so different. I
yeah.
can't go out on my deck and, stare at the mountains. Now I've got a townhouse that I could touch with my arm if I could stuck it out the window, you know, and it's just the whole experience is very different than what I'm used to. And at the end of the day, am I in a miserable place? No, it's just I'm having to get used to things being different than what I was used to for 28 years. And so I've come to realize that that's really what it's about, right? People just don't like change, but I feel like this will be a really good change for almost everybody, in terms of their evolution in business. And like I said, I mean, we have we had an incredible base of customers, all over the United States and Canada, and they were remarkable customers. But I'm not going to lie, I mean, we lost half as many as we had because they needed additional features and things that we weren't going to do anytime soon, right? And so I feel like now our existing customers are going to have a great platform that has everything that they've ever, been using. But then the ones that are graduating and their businesses are growing and they're opening up another location, or they want to hire another person, or they want to start selling more products. It's just
Online store is pretty cool because you
yeah.
don't need a third party to integrate that into your
Yeah,
business.
and there's a lot more coming that I can't really talk about, but that they're working on that I
Awesome.
think is going to be really amazing. Incorporating AI into a lot of things that like will make it what you think is so much easier now even easier. And so that's really, really cool. I'm looking forward to people having that experience.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time, Jerry, and for everything you brought to the lives of myself and my fellow estheticians and the beauty space in general. So thank you for sharing your story today.
Well, I appreciate it, and as you know, I love you very, very much, and I'm honored, not only to have worked with you and learned from you, what you've done with your business, and what you've done in empowering and helping estheticians to grow and become successful has always been something that I had remarkable respect for and derived a lot of inspiration from as well.
Oh, well, thank you. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. And the love goes right back to you. So I'm glad you're part of my life and we'll be chatting.
Yes, we
So
will.
thanks so much for your time today.
All right. Love ya.
Love you.
Ciao.
Thanks for tuning in to the Beauty Biz Show. I hope the episode has left you feeling inspired to build the beauty biz of your dreams. As always, we appreciate your kind reviews as it helps us attract amazing guests to be interviewed. Also, be sure to give me a follow on Instagram at Lori_BeautyBiz and SpaStar_Lux. If you'd like to know more about how we can work together, visit beautybizclub.com, where we are busy helping estheticians create outrageously abundant careers.